good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. This is Scott Bogen with Thunderworks Games with this crazy guy over here. That is Jason Lentz, the designer of Dawn of Ulos, and also an international arms dealer, I understand.
And these are the arms.
And those are the arms. You got to tell us what's going on with those, Jason.
Yeah, maybe it's almost been about 10 years ago. Actually, longer than that. I started building these things in university, and then after I graduated, I rebuilt them again, and the internet found me. So I started making a business out of it. Wow. And selling these around the world, technically making me an international arms dealer. And I've got I had the full adult size, then I made a Kickstarter for the kid size. I'm going to take these off. I'm not going to do the whole interview with the arms. Sorry.
Oh, okay. We want to see you play Dawn of Ulos with those arms on.
That would go poorly.
They are pretty cool, and it's such an interesting thing. How many of those are you making, selling, mailing out in a given month or two?
Not enough that I can retire. I am the least profitable international arms dealer, I'm pretty sure. But the first run, the very first run was I decided, okay, let's see if there's a market for these. And I put up an Etsy page, Etsy store. And I said, okay, I'm up for making 10 pairs of arms, see if there's an interest. And sure enough, they all sold out pretty quickly. And I said, okay, all right. So a friend and I, we pooled our money together and that was after I hand cut those 10 arms. That was the last time I wanted to cut any more arms by hand. So we paid to do a die cut of 300 pairs of arms. So wow. I now know what 5 tons of cardboard looks like.
Wow. Are they always made out of cardboard, the ones that you sell?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And then they arrive flat, and then you have like assembly instructions and stuff like that.
Yep, I've got like a IKEA style. Here's how you put the arms together, and just a bunch of pictures and how you insert tube here and Velcro these, and it comes with all the Velcro you need to attach it together. There's some gluing that you need to do in some parts of it, but and you put them all together, and it takes probably about an hour to assemble the kits for the first time, and then they come apart and flatten down and go back together in about 15 minutes if you want to. Actually, 15 minutes is for the whole suit. I don't sell the whole suit. I've got a box back here that has the torso and the cardboard briefs. Those are key. They tie the whole outfit together.
Yeah, Keith just said some assembly required.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, they're super cool. So thanks for sharing that with us. If you're just joining us and you missed Jason showing off his giant robotic arms, you'll have to rewind and take a look at them. So
absolutely, yeah.
But the real reason we're here is to talk about your game, Dawn of Ulos.
My prototype copy. You've got a better one there up in the screen.
Oh yeah. Here's another one. We got all 3 of them. We can have on the screen at once. Gotta get yours out too. There we go. Comes in all shapes and sizes. We promise they'll all look the same though when the Kickstarter backers get them.
And much nicer than this.
Yeah. Yours looks quite different from mine, even, doesn't it? That's funny. So that's Dawn of Ulos. And before we actually just jump into talking about the game, I do want to hear a little bit more about you and your background, so people can kind of know where you come from and what you do for a living other than designing games and making robotic arms. Maybe that's all you do. That would be cool for me.
It pretty much is, but my day job is I work as a video game designer, and so I do afford rent through making video games, and I'm doing board game design on the side as kind of a side hustle, along with my international arms dealing operation.
Well, that's very cool. Games, and mechanical arms.
Yep,
that's good stuff, man. So, how long have you been, designing board games, Jason?
I started designing board games. If I go back to the first board games I designed, I don't remember the year, but it's probably the 1980s, and they weren't good. I mean, it was just I was a kid playing around, coming up with my own stuff. I remember, even before I got into Dungeons and Dragons. I played. Someone introduced me to Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't have my own copy, so I designed my own copy first before I ended up getting mine, and did that with a number of other games. But when I seriously started getting into board game design was probably about 6 or 7 years ago. There was video games is a volatile industry, and I ended up finding myself with a whole bunch of spare time after some layoffs, and I managed to connect with the Bay Area board game development scene, which is full of brilliant individuals and super welcoming, like Luke Laurie, John Brieger, John Velgas, Michael Dunsmore. There's tons of great designers there, all collaborating, helping each other learn the craft, and so I started making various types of prototypes, and start out kind of with some design, just kind of challenge experiments of taking 2 games that I own and see like what happens if you combine these components and make a new game. So like Settlers of Carcassonne and
oh, cool.
Yeah. Doing some experiments with that, and but then I started making my own original things, and learning some lessons the hard way of like it's really tempting to, I think, start diving into the art because you want to make it pretty, but that just slows down the design process. And it's you have these kind of quick and dirty prototypes that you can make changes to, not get too attached, like, all right, change this, and be back into the next play test in like another 5 minutes, instead of having to go home, print out new stuff, and it's a lot more expensive to do and start with an art first approach too.
Oh my gosh, yes. So how did the journey to designing Dawn of Ulos begin? And what were you inspired by? And what did that journey look like in the early days?
Yeah, I had a few different prototypes going, some that I've been working on for quite a while, but they weren't quite congealing. And then I had this other idea of, I think it's come up that a big part of the inspiration of Dawn of Ulos was a game from the mid 1960s called Acquire.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Which is, I love that game. And I think a lot, even still today, it's got tons of fans. Like, what is it?
It does.
I don't even know if I want to count the years, how long it's been out. But it's diehard fans. But if you compare Acquire to a lot of the games that are coming out today, it's got this gray alphanumeric grid that doesn't really scream, "Hey, come play me!"
Right.
And I kind of started with that, to figure out like, okay, how can I modernize Acquire, and I threw in some extra ideas, and so it's this kind of tile placement investment game, and I thought like, okay, what if these factions were not stocks, but fantasy creatures, and what if they all had abilities? And I went probably a little bit too deep. In fact, you could find different abilities in each of the, like, so say like you've got the Sheki. They weren't called Sheki at the time, but if you went through the deck of the Sheki cards, like almost every card had a different ability. Some were more powerful than others, and that was just a terrible idea. It turned out like you basically won if you got the right Sheki card. So it took me a few play tests to trying to get that to work, and realize, okay, let's just figure out what's the most compelling ability for these tree people, and make all of them that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, the Acquire thing is interesting. I think I played it with you pretty early on. We had a play test sometime early in COVID, and we're showing it off, and we're kind of honing it at that point. And it is reminiscent of that. But for me, as somebody, I enjoyed Acquire. I didn't love Acquire, but this game I loved because it really felt like I was doing the things that the theme suggests in this game, where you have factions instead of, or armies, factions, armies, whatever you want to call them. We call them factions in the game, are spreading, and that just visually makes sense, where, Acquire is very abstract. You're like, this company is getting bigger. Doesn't necessarily represent, it just represents the abstract nature of that company getting bigger. And here you're actually spreading across a really super cool landscape. And I should throw that up on the screen for you, just kind of like, we're looking at these boards here. And that's how it looks. So I could see your temptation to, yeah, you probably wanted to add color and beautiful graphics right away because you're in your head, you're probably thinking more about what this looks like,
Yes.
but it
Yeah.
probably didn't look like that for a long time, did it?
No, no. The first version, it was I had color, but it was just color. Like you
Okay.
know, a light blue, a light yellow, a light green, a gray, and I had that for a while until I did a play test where someone who suffered from like one of the rarest forms of color blindness got into it and said like, "Are these hexes different colors?" I'm like, oh no. So the very next play test, I think it's like the next day, I like replaced all of those with textured environment things that's a little bit prettier, but then you could at least make out the different things. I thought it wasn't as good as certainly not as good as it is now, but yeah, I wanted to say, okay, this game needs to be, I want it to be accessible to everybody.
Sure. Well, going with again your choir initial inspiration. What did you want to make different? Like what did you looked at a choir and you went, I really want to do this, and this. I want to add these other cool elements to it. Like what design considerations did you have in that direction?
Yeah, so I mean, making it more colorful and inviting was a big thing, and also grids can be. I think that they're not as compelling as hexagons. But what's the YouTube channel? I forget the channel, but the hexagons or bestigons.
Oh yeah,
yeah. They offer a lot more flexibility and that, yeah, I was trying to figure out like how are you going to like what is the tile placement mechanic going to be in this game? I think it's a step up from what it was in Acquire. Like in Acquire, you can get stuck like these are the tiles I have and they aren't really working for me, and you're really at the mercy of the tiles. And to some extent, that's still true in Dawn of Ulos, but I think you do have a lot more flexibility you definitely have a lot more flexibility of where you can place those tiles and kind of develop your strategy and adjust it as needed.
So now the game comes with 10 different fantasy factions and all that. When you were first designing it, were you thinking Thunderworks Games as the publisher, or imagining it's more you're just kind of redoing generic fantasy, or how were you designing it early?
I was doing a generic fantasy, but yeah, and I realized that the reason why I went generic fantasy is because I didn't want to. Fantasy has a lot of different ways it can go, and I think it's adaptable to like if I needed to make it steampunk or sci-fi, I was totally fine with doing that. But I still use the fantasy elements to kind of guide what sort of abilities that I wanted to have. Like some part of it was kind of coming up with the ability and then finding some fantasy trope to go with that ability. And sometimes it went the other way around, where I early on had a leprechaun faction in the game. And so, okay, their ability is going to have to do with money and the currency of the game. Yeah, instead of favor, I started out with gold.
Okay.
But yeah, so that led me to leprechauns. But then when I went around pitching to various publishers, I mean, Thunderworks, the Dawn of Ulos theme just fit so well. Some of the factions needed to change, like leprechauns. There's no leprechauns in the world of Ulos.
Right.
Goblins.
Right.
And yeah, and yeah, so it's and some of the changes, the factions didn't have to change at all. Like the ogres are ogres, orcs are orcs, elves are elves. But some of the factions, like the leprechauns, got an upgrade. Like I had merfolk, which was kind of this bland, what's a merfolk? But I switched that into frogkin.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and the frogkin, that's way more character and appeal, I think, than just like the generic merfolk. And this, I know a lot of people are excited to see frogkin in this game, and I'm one of them.
Yes. So, and I think what's really cool, and if people don't realize this, but the idea that every single turn you're placing these different terrain tiles that you have, because you're it's like in most card games you have a hand of cards, and this one you have a hand of tiles. you're going to have 3 tiles. And I have an example of a tile here. They come in all different types of terrain types, but you're going to have those, in hand. And then can you kind of talk about sort of how that works in gameplay and what the effect of placing tiles on the board actually does?
Sure. So the tiles, I mean, it's instead of the alphanumeric from Acquire, it's like I put trees on trees, mountains on mountains, desert on desert, and fields on fields. And so it's very kind of intuitive and easy to follow. But what happens when you place a tile, there's quite a number of things that can happen. One is you can start a camp. So if you just match the shape of one of the camps, I've got some here, like if it's a straight camp with 3 in a row, you'll start it there. If you've got the triangular camp, you can start one of them. And then the third permutation of the tiles, that will start something like the ogres. So you can start a camp, and that gets you a free faction card from one of those camps. Or if the camps are already on the board, you can place those tiles next to a faction that cares about those particular terrain types. Like I've got a little mini here for the goblins. They care about trees and deserts, forests and deserts. So if and that tile was a mountain and trees. The mountain wouldn't help out the goblins, but the trees would help bump up their strength and their value. Sure. Or another thing you can do by placing a tile is if you connect it to a rift token, a camp to a rift token, which are these little spots on the board that you can use to start a camp, or like say if you connect it, you will get that rift token, and there's a special ability on the back side of that you can use once per turn. So those are pretty clearly, everybody loves going for rift tokens. That was just a straight up win once I introduced those. It's like, yeah. It's a clear objective. Like, oh, I know those are good. Let me connect to one of those so I can pick it up.
Yeah, and it adds such a nice little asymmetrical treat to your gameplay. And you also then, like a lot of games, you have to think about, do I keep this because it's going to be worth points at the end, or do I use it for its really cool ability?
Yeah. I think that usually it's best to use for its ability.
Yeah, I can see that.
But since you can only use one per turn, I don't want to feel people like maybe they were saving it for the right moment and they missed their moment, and then they have these rift tokens. Like, oh no, that's just a terrible feeling of missed opportunities. I don't want that. So I still get some money from it. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah. I can't remember. What's the point value of holding onto a rift? Is it just 1 a piece, or is it
3? You get 3 favor for a rift token.
It's 3. Okay. Yeah. So it's that classic. That's the way I lose games. I'll be like, oh, I just lost by 2 points, and if I just hadn't spent my rift token, I would have won. But I like that. That adds just another cool decision point in the game.
Yeah.
And speaking of decision points, you have those faction cards, right? So you're picking up faction cards and to support the factions that you want to support. And, one of the things I've seen people misunderstand with this game is that they think they might be playing a faction, but no, you're playing gods who are playing all the factions in a sense. You're just deciding which ones you want to get behind and which ones you don't. But my point here, my rambling point here, is that another cool decision point in the game are these faction cards that have abilities on. Do I hold it for later for points, or do I play it now for its cool ability? So can you talk about that a little bit? I mean, I think that's a really interesting part of the game. And you mentioned even early on that you really liked the fact that you added those abilities to those factions. Cards.
Yeah, it's I think that's one of the big changes I made from Acquire to Dawn of Ulos, and this does a few different things. One, like there's a trap that you can kind of fall into in Acquire where you've spent all your money, and then what can you do? You just have to be at the mercy of someone to wait for an acquisition to happen, or like a merger to happen. But this, you can always generate your own money, because every time you use a faction card, you'll get its current value, its spoils value. And But yeah, there's a cost. I mean, if you save it for later, it could be even more at the end of the game. But the other thing that you get when you use it immediately is there is an ability associated with each faction, which gets stronger the longer the more valuable it is.
Right.
And that's another kind of like tug and pull of like, I could, if I use it now, it's only going to be this good. But if I can hold on to it for a little better, make it a little bit better, it's going to be that good.
Yes. Yeah. I have the Shecky on the screen right now. And if just for people, it says for every 2 Shecky strength that you have, move 1 development tile to another position within the same territory. And you're literally like changing, the entire array of a faction with this ability. So yeah, getting that 1 extra to move is probably a pretty big deal.
You can use it to start a conflict, pick up a rift token, or maybe you're just clearing it because you have this 1 tile and there's no place to put it because you've already covered it with another tile. You can clear that out, and you're not changing the strength of the whatever camp you're using it on, because Shekis can be used on other camps as well.
Yes, I know in one of the games I played, it was fun to use it in a way. I had one person who wanted combat to take place with the Sheki. I didn't, so I was taking territory that was close to that one and moving it to the other side. So it's just super interesting. But that's just 1 of 10 of the special abilities of all these different factions, and so even just that 1 was like super fun and super deep and so many different ways to use it. Anyways, I think the game is pretty awesome. Although I'm a little biased.
Me too.
Well, let's see, what else can we talk about? We need to talk about combat, because I mean that's
another really interesting decision point in there.
Yes. So to tell us about it. How does that work, and how do you make it happen?
As soon as 2 territories touch, either by placing a tile, or you can like use the Sheki to connect them by moving a tile around, you'll flip that tile upside down because it's not going to belong to either side. Only 1 camp can exist in a territory at a time. So these 2 factions are going to battle it out, and they'll each have their own strength going into it based on their value. But that's not what determines the outcome. Like one faction may have an initial advantage, but what every player who has faction cards for either one of these camps can now contribute it to one side or the other, or both. It doesn't matter. You're going to profit either way,
right?
Because, like you said, you're not playing these camps. You're investing in as many of them as you want to.
Yes.
And so what happens when you invest a faction card is you're going to have to discard at least half of them. You'll still get the pre-battle value for it because all the factions are insured. Don't worry, there's the Bank of the Gods. They'll give you your favor. But afterwards, one of those factions is going to own all of that territory, and the other faction is going to be taken off the map, and its value is going to go back down to basically nothing.
And in the game, we call them lost factions.
Right. Yeah. The lost factions are the ones that are off the map. And they can come back. They can find their way. But once they're off the map again, they're lost and low value.
The ebb and flow of that is super interesting, because it really does feel like you're spanning hundreds, thousands of years of evolution of this world, because, factions will rise and they'll fall, and then they'll come back in another place, and then they'll fall again. And some of them will just stay on the board for most of the game, and all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. It's like really very interesting dynamic. And you never know what's going to happen.
That's reminding me of another introduction that came from working with Thunderworks, is when they kind of started refining the strength tracker. Is that what we're calling it now? Actually,
yeah.
Make sure I get the terminology.
We call it a strength board.
Strength board. Yes. Okay, not far off. Yeah,
that's and I have a picture of it. I can throw up on the screen too for everybody. Yeah. I actually thought ahead. Here we go.
One of the challenges with game design is there's so many different versions, trying to keep them all straight. Like what's the version we're on now?
Anyway, for sure.
One of the innovations that came from working with Thunderworks in developing the strength tracker is that once we got a faction up to the top, people wanted like something extra special to happen there. And so that's where the legendary factions came from, or reaching legendary status, which means any factions that have reached legendary are going to be worth 2 more favor at the end of the game, no matter what point they are. And like if you get knocked down, you were legendary once, you're always legendary. And
oh wow, right.
Yeah.
And if people look at that graphic, you can see I just have a little slice of it that's close up, but at the very top of it, that's what the whole board looks like. So if you're able to move that all the way down to the end, that's what Jason's talking about. And then you'll flip it, and it's like, hey, this faction's awesome now. even more awesome. And hey, by the way, we are witnessing board game development happening as we speak. Keith he declared that it's called. I happen to miss this. It's called the Power Board now. So it's funny. Like, so I have a version of the rules. I guess I didn't print out the most recent, but it's now called the Power Board. So, but that works. That works too.
Yep. The game just keeps on getting better and better. That's right.
And there's been a lot of work on the tiles on the board and sort of making sure that that they look awesome when you're playing, so that you can really see which ones are the factions and which ones is the original board. And so we're making that look really cool now, and so it's all being worked on. That was something that's come up a few times with on the Kickstarter comments. But again, what we had going into the Kickstarter was the old version, but we were in the midst of working on that art and improving it. So it's going to be great when you get it. So how does the game end, Jason? When do you finish playing Dawn of Ulos?
As soon as there are 2 factions that become legendary, that will trigger the end of the game. It doesn't have to be, they don't have to be both at maximum. Like I said, one faction can be knocked down, but as soon as the second one becomes legendary, that will trigger the end of the game. Or if you go to draw a development tile and there is no more development tiles to be drawn, that will trigger the end of the game. And then you play out until everyone's got an even number of equal number of turns, which means that the person who is last at the start will have the last turn of the game.
Gotcha.
And that's it.
Well, Keith has a great question. What's your favorite thing about Dawn of Ulos? And do you have a favorite faction, and why?
Favorite thing about Dawn of Ulos. I think that is that the scaling ability of the factions themselves is I've noticed this in a lot of the play tests that I've done, or especially the early ones, that players will play the game and they'll get orcs up to legendary status. And sorry, my cat. Camera time.
What's your cat's name?
Susu. Short for the Susu Watari, which are the soot creatures from the Miyazaki movies. Cool. I didn't know that was their name until I looked it up. I said, yes, that's her name. But yeah, so factions, scaling abilities. Yeah. Oh, and then with the orcs, they get the orcs up to legendary, and then after the game, they say, "Oh, the orcs are overpowered. You got to nerf them." And then I don't do any changes, and I play test it with another group, and they get the Sheki up to maximum strength. Like, oh, those Sheki, those are so strong. Like, and every time it's whatever faction gets up to the most powerful thing. You
that's funny.
Yeah, and
that's playtest. That's why you do it, right?
Yeah, and so I mean, if I made one change based on that first one, I think I just would have made the orcs less interesting.
Yeah, you can definitely overcorrect if you don't really watch yourself.
Yeah. But as for most a favorite faction, I kind of like the satyrs. They're a little bit tricky to use, but their ability is that for every 2 favor, you get to get a lost faction for free. And that's the cheapest you can get a factions. You're the kind of name of the game is the how you play is like buy low, sell high. And there they are.
You're there.
And it can be tricky to use them because once all the factions get on the board, they're not as powerful. But factions will come off the board, and then you can spend that time building up the satyr in preparation, and then you just kind of convert your satyrs to another faction. Like if you have a satyr that's up at a legendary satyr, play one down, and you'll get 5 factions for free. All you have to do is get them on the board, and like not just double. Yeah, you've taken a value. Yeah, you doubled their value.
Yeah, that's unreal too. And you could take all the same one too if you want to put all your eggs in one basket too, right?
Yeah, yeah, you can diversify. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's really cool. Mary White has a question for us here. What did you guys do the first day of the Kickstarter? Did you try to work business as usual? Did you all get together and celebrate? Watch the numbers climb? Boy, as nice as that sounds, I wish. There's so much to do on Kickstarter Day. It's kind of surprising on the marketing side. There's posts to get up, there's monitoring, making sure all the links are working everywhere. That's what we were doing on our end. We were celebrating in our own way. Certainly, we were slacking each other and, congratulating and all of that. But we were doing a lot of work on that day. How about you? What did you do?
Yeah, so that most of that work was on your end. I basically just kind of got to sit back and look pretty.
Yeah.
But I got a bit silly, and I've got a wall over here that I project movies onto, but I put the movies away and just put the Kickstarter page up there. I was watching the backers come in, and that was my evening, and keeping track of answering questions that came up on the Kickstarter and answering those as quickly as I could.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. And that was probably pretty fun to do too, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. John Godwin has a question. Has anyone asked why asymmetric god powers were decided against? No one has asked that today.
Not today in this one, but that's an excellent question.
People have talked about it.
Yeah, we did experiment with those. I even had them early on, before it was Dawn of Ulos, and experimenting with a few different things. But yeah, the god powers that we were experimenting with specifically for Dawn of Ulos, I think we got them to a pretty balanced point, but not all of them were godly.
Right.
There was a few that like this is a one-time ability. You get to do something super crazy. But the other ones are just like, yeah, that's pretty good. But,
yeah.
And
exactly. I had a good look at them too with Keith one day when I went into the office briefly, and yeah, that was exactly our conversation. And it's like, like any game, you want to get everything right and you want it to be awesome. So, we have no problem, not having those in the game until they're great. And when and if those do come out, they will be awesome. So. That gives us an experience.
I wouldn't say that we've given up on them. There's definitely, and I think that we can get them all to that godly level.
Yes, godly level. I like that. John is really big in our World of Ulos group, and he does some of the live streams for us with solitaire play. So it made me think of that right away. You also designed the solo version of Dawn of Ulos. That, looking at how this game plays, like if I hadn't seen the solo version yet, I'd be like, oh my gosh, how am I going to design a solo version of this? How difficult was that? Where did you begin?
I was watching when I was starting to talk with or pitch the game to Dawn of Ulos. I was watching one of Keith's live streams, and I took note when he said that he was really proud that all of the games at Thunderworks have a solo mode. And like, all right, if I'm pitching to Thunderworks, I need to have a solo mode. And I started playing several different solo modes. Rurik Dawn of Kiev, there's Whistle Mountain, I got the Underfalling Skies and Dwellings of Eldervale, and started kind of learning, like, okay, what things do I like about different solo modes, what things do I want to avoid, and started experimenting with a couple of versions. And I got something that was kind of working, and then it was actually when I played the solo mode for Dwellings of Eldervale. Luke Laurie has a system in there where there's 3 different lanes that you're rolling a die to determine which like AI card is going to activate.
Oh, sure.
Oh, that's super cool. That system allows you to kind of predict what the AI is going to do, but without perfect certainty. But that wasn't enough for Dawn of Ulos, because the game really works when you're kind of planning a turn or two in advance.
Yes.
The way we do the order of things is you're placing on a tile to make a faction better, but then you buy it. And really what players want to do is they want to buy it and then place the tile to make the thing they just bought better.
Yes.
That's not how it works. So you have to, yeah, I'm going to place this, I bought this stuff last turn. Now I'm going to make it better. And that's where it kind of works. You could do it that way, but it's more efficient to kind of buy it cheap and then build it up. So I was trying, how can I do an AI that will do that? So that's what led to this kind of top and bottom system, to that 3-lane choice of what choice the AI is going to do.
And a little example of it there. You can kind of see the card slots there at the top and bottom.
Right. So you have a card that's going to start out at the top, and those are all of the development tiles. So where it's going to place the development tile onto what different faction. There you go. And then the bottom part, you'll notice that the red symbol denotes there's the 5 different shapes and colors that'll go with the 5 different factions you're playing with, and then whichever camp is associated with that red pentagon, they're also going to buy that and the middle section is what cards they try and buy if they can afford to, so that they're going to place a tile onto the red thing and buy, but you don't do them in that order. You'll flip over this card. You'll see it's going to go in the first lane. So you put that in the bottom, and you'll obscure the top part where you're placing a development tile. And in that lane, there's already going to be a card at the top, and you'll place a tile on that, and then you'll buy from the red. And then after you're done with the AI's turn, you just take this card and replace the top one. So next time that this lane comes up, it's going to be expanding the red camp.
That's true. Yeah. First you see the bottom of the card at the bottom, and then after that you see the top of the card at the top. So it has like dual purpose, but not on the same turn, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for explaining that. And it's a tough thing to describe, sort of on the spot quickly. You almost have to have all the diagrams and all that. Because the thing I found that was, I personally think that the challenge of doing this solo would be, I mean, the AI is placing tiles on this big board, right? It's like, where are they placing them? And so you came up with this really cool kind of algorithm that you just kind of go through, and first you start here and you work your way across, and where it fits, it fits.
Yep. Yeah. It's a lot of words to explain, but once you grok it, it's a fairly kind of, I feel it's a fairly intuitive, like just like reading a book. You start from left to right, and there's just a few things that you look for. Like the priority of the AI is, first, they want to try and start a conflict. Then they want to try and pick up a rift, like connect a rift token to a camp. And if they can't do that, they just want to expand the camp that they've got.
Yep.
And yeah, so and then you do that through a left to the right process. And yeah, it
worked out well. I played the solo version. It was very tough. I think I mentioned to you, I made it inadvertently easier on myself. I had misread, and I think I was having the AI give up cards at one point when they were supposed to be keeping them.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I gave myself a few different goals for the solo mode. So one, I want it to be easy to play, like you don't have to do a lot, really any or very little thinking on the AI's turn. So you're just kind of following instructions. 2, I wanted there to be different difficulties, and the third one, I forgot. Well, those are the 2 big ones. Sure. I feel like there's a third one in there too. And so part of the easy to play is that means that I had to remove the they don't use any of the abilities of the factions.
Yeah,
and that would just be too much to consider in the solo mode.
Yeah. I mean,
And
that it's almost impossible, right? Because it's like they're so situational, and it's like
right,
you'd have to
yeah, you would have like a
think on
different flow
behalf of the
chart for
AI.
every single ability, and
Yeah.
it's like no, I don't. Yeah, I didn't want people to be having to reference like, okay, what happens in here? Let me check the rules. No, because I played some solo modes that they work, but
Yeah.
almost every turn I had to reference the rules.
It would have been like a coin game. Nothing against those, but the coin games, like Andy and Abyss and all that, they have this robust system that has you really kind of doing everything, but it has that effect where you have to check charts and if then statements and
Right.
all that, and it can get really really muddy. That's great for some solo gamers who like that sort of thing, but yeah, you also want it to be like, hey, I want to just get into this and play.
Right. Yeah, I
And
would slow down the turns and.
yeah, and I like that the player, you're playing against the AI, but I like that the player just played the game the way they normally would.
Yeah,
Like there weren't any like major changes, like some solo systems are like almost an entirely different game, and I like that this you are playing Dawn of Ulos when you play solo.
Yep, I remember the third thing that I wanted is something that you could also have like an automaton that you could add, and you don't have to play it just one-on-one. If you have two of you and you want to play a 3-player game, you can add in the AI if you want. But yeah, I think most people would prefer to have a human spot in that player, or a human player in that spot.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I did. That it is an option that you can do.
For sure. Well, thanks for talking about all that. And taking the time today to talk more about Dawn of Ulos. We appreciate everybody who's backed it so far. And even appreciate you if you haven't yet and are there just thinking about it. So I hope videos, like this, help you make an informed decision. We always try to put out super awesome games. And, one thing I wanted to say to everyone who's watching this is that this doesn't have anything to do with Dawn of Ulos, but wanted people to be aware that we're running this really cool little challenge over in the world of Ulos that we haven't done anything like this before. We're calling it the Cartographers Challenge. And if you go to the World of Ulos group, now it's a private group now, so we had to lock it down because of all the spam we were getting. But if you're not a member, go to World of Ulos. It'll be the top post in there, and there's a Cartographers Challenge, and there's a way for you to submit an answer to sort of a puzzle. You have to figure out what the scoring cards are by looking at the map and the scores for each round. So you have to decide what were the scoring cards for this particular game. And you submit that to us, and the winner is going to win $30 off their next purchase in our online store. So that could be an incentive to join the World of Ulos group if you like puzzles like that, and if you like $30. We're also going to be giving away some promo codes for Cartographers Digital because Cartographers Heroes was just added to that. So whether you have an Android device or an Apple device, this code will work for you to add that expansion on to your Cartographers Digital game. So just wanted to get that out there. Anything I didn't ask you about, Jason, that you want to mention, or are you good?
I think we're pretty good. Yeah.
Okay. I really enjoyed it. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks for your questions. If you have further questions, drop them in the comments and we'll just answer them after the fact. So
absolutely.
Hope you all have a good day. Thanks.
All right. Have a good one.